Hi, welcome to another episode of Sports Talk, Law Talk with your host, Byron Brown. Well, I, for one, am happy the NFL is back. It was great to see the pigskin flying around the field again. A couple things to note. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes had a great game. Kansas City Chiefs did their thing like they always do. Tom Brady looked good there. I'd say the first half, maybe just the first quarter. But thereafter, it seemed to me the wheels kind of fell off. But reading what all of the experts say, they still think that Tom has what it takes, and we will see throughout the course of the season. It's hard to count him out, but they played the Saints, and Drew Brees definitely won the quarterback competition out of that game. So we will see how it plays out over time. But I don't, with that showing, it's hard to believe that they're going to make the playoffs, let alone win the Super Bowl that I think some people were talking about. But from that from a sport with everyone with two hands to one where a lady deliberately cut off her own hand. So this is out of Slovakia, right? Slovakia, 22-year-old lady takes a circular saw and cuts off her hand. A couple of years before, what she did is she went out and got 5 different insurance policies. Her idea was, and this is what she did, this is a real life story, she was cutting some branches at her house. This is how the story goes, at least that she told police. And she accidentally cut off her left hand with a circular saw. She left the hand at the scene of the amputation, so to speak, and she ran to the hospital. And then that's where officials got a little fishy. They went to the house, they did their investigation, they saw the hand there. One of the things that they looked at right away was the browser history on the computer. There they found that the boyfriend of this Slovenian woman was Googling prosthetic hands. And that search occurred before the circular saw was used. So this lady is 100% guilty of insurance fraud. And in fact, that's what happened to her. She was found guilty of insurance fraud and she was sentenced to 2 years in jail. Do you think that's enough time? I mean, shit, man, her punishment in and of itself is that she now has one hand. Definitely still has to serve her time for the crime she committed of insurance fraud, but it seems to me maybe a little redundant. I'm not saying that the girl should get no jail time, but it kind of seems like an extra punishment. I mean, she punished herself. She didn't get any money. I mean, it is what it is. People, I guess, are that maybe that desperate and or that stupid. I don't know which one it is. Or is she that desperate, stupid? Is it a combination of both? I don't know. But from one fraud to another, we got Jussie Smollett. Jussie. I keep saying Jesse. It's Jussie. Jussie Smollett is in the news again. And this time, he's still trying to profess his innocence. And he says things like, everybody's changing the narrative on him. Everybody's against him. Listen, I, for one, and let's briefly talk about what happened here, right? We got Jussie Smollett, who said he was out in Chicago one night, and some people ran up to him yelling homophobic slurs, racial slurs, and then they dumped bleach on him, roughed him up, and threw a noose around his neck. What happened in the days to come, and even months to come, was an investigation by the city of Chicago, the Chicago Police Department, and they found surveillance footage of 2 gentlemen that were Jussie Smollett's trainer, and I guess they met on the set of Boardwalk Empire, and they would also buy him drugs on occasion. These 2 guys are videoed at a hardware store buying tape and rope. This is days before the alleged incident. We also have video footage that circulated of the police arriving at Jussie Smollett's apartment on the night of the incident, and Jussie still had the noose around his neck. I'm telling you, as a lawyer, credibility is always a major issue. And hours after this incident happened, the fact that Jussie Smollett is wandering around his apartment with a noose around his neck, and it was loose. It wasn't like he needed assistance to take it off. He could have taken it off at any point in time. Listen, I don't care. You throw a noose around my neck I'm going to take it off as soon as I can. So I think that factor, honestly, in and of itself, causes me to question Jussie Smollett's entire story. That added on top of it, you have the video surveillance of two guys he knows buying rope. He says the people that threw the racial epithets in his direction were white. These two gentlemen are black. So nothing adds up. And it's the old adage that I tell, juries when I'm trying cases is, if it just doesn't add up, if it just doesn't make sense, if it just doesn't smell right, then it's probably not right. And that is what I think is happening. Jussie has no other choice other than to keep professing his innocence, because arguably if he just came out and said, yeah, I made all this shit up, it's most likely going to hurt his career and obviously hurt his character. From fraud to football, we got the Big Ten. The Big Ten is back, but it wasn't without some drama. We had specifically a group of Nebraska football players file a lawsuit against the Big Ten. And part of their allegations was that the school has no ability to shut down football, especially because they're robbing the players of their ability to make money off of their commercial likeness. Obviously, if they can't play football, there's no fans that are able to see them. If the fans can't see them, they can't build up their name. If they can't build up their name, arguably that could hurt their draft prospects, but it also can hurt their ability to get sponsorship deals, which if you remember, like Gronkowski, he talks about how he lived off of his endorsement money his entire career and never touched the money he actually got for football. So that endorsement money is a lot. Well, and then whenever a lawsuit is filed, what happens is the rules of civil procedure for that particular state kick in. And what that means is the sides can start discovery. Discovery is the part of a lawsuit where you're able to gather facts. So only after filing a lawsuit does a lawyer or a law firm have ability to subpoena companies, subpoena people to ask them questions, subpoena documents, take depositions, which is a time where they can question people under oath with a court reporter sitting there. But what we saw with the Nebraska players that I think resulted in the Big Ten changing its course, meaning changing its course in playing football, is that they had to give up certain information, right? Whenever you're in a lawsuit, you got to give up information. So Tom Mars, an attorney, made certain requests on the 13 teams that are part of the Big Ten, asking for emails exchanged regarding COVID, cancellation, and other search terms. Obviously, they're trying to get information from these universities of exactly what was talked about in coming up with a decision to cancel the season. And obviously, these universities probably have some concern. What's in these emails? Every time you can read an email, you can kind of Monday night quarterback that email, right? You can think that someone really meant X or Y. So I think they're very uncertain about handing over documents, and what that resulted in them changing the course, coming together and going, okay, we're going to put football on the field. Because what happens now when they say they're going to put football on the field, some of the lawsuits have already been dismissed, and I think you're going to see all of the lawsuits dismissed because everybody sued to play football, so you give them back football. They drop the lawsuits. With the lawsuits being dropped, all of a sudden now there's no legal obligation to turn over information or documents. So any skeletons that may be in the closet of the schools that are part of the Big Ten can stay there. So going from Big Ten in football back over to a Black Lives Matter issue. We have a Rosati pizza delivery driver out of Milwaukee, and we got a video of it. Just before we show you the video, what you're about to see is the pizza delivery driver facing the owner, his boss, videotaping the communication. And what the communication is over is this particular driver, who's white, was wearing a Black Lives Matters mask, and the owner is politely, at the beginning at least, telling him that he cannot wear that mask at work because the work policy is no political statements. So let's run the clip.
Business owner, I have a policy here: no religion, no politics, no swearing.
Thanks a lot.
So what you saw is exactly kind of what I told you to, right? Is you have a delivery driver that is questioning the owner about why he can't wear his Black Lives Matters mask. And the one point the driver makes relatively at the beginning is, hey, no one told me this when I was hired. Well, legally speaking, that doesn't mean shit. Your employer can implement a new policy and procedure at any point in time. So if you're going to even assume that the employer didn't tell the employee at the beginning of his employment that he couldn't wear a Black Lives Matter mask, it doesn't matter. Also, we obviously don't know when he started his work, but I don't know if he started his work before the Black Matters movement began or after, but obviously if he began before, there would be no ability of the employer to say that you can't wear a Black Lives Matter mask. Then as the video continues, you can see the owner, he says, hey, listen, are you going to follow the new rules? And the employee says no. And he says, okay, you're done. Then he turns away. And I think up until that point of the turn, the employer is okay. Because as long as he, and we'll talk about this more, as long as he's enforcing the anti-political rule, we'll call it, evenly across the board, then I don't think he can face legal action. I mean, anybody can file a lawsuit, but would that lawsuit be successful? I think no. And I'll give you my reasons more why. But before we go there, the other part of it then is that the employer seems to make physical contact with the employee. When he walks back to the door and then he turns, you can see at that moment, I believe, it's when the employer first realizes he's being videoed by the employee. He gets angry, and then there appears to be, and obviously we don't know for certain, but some physical contact. Now, any physical contact is battery. So right there, the employer, if he did in fact make physical contact with the employee, which I think he did, then the employee would have the ability to file a lawsuit against the employer for civil battery, simple touching. Obviously, the question would be, what would his damages be? And I think a jury would find his damages to be minimal, if anything. I think the political statement he was making, Black Lives Matters, helps his case to the point that if he did file some sort of action against his employer, I think the employer would pay some money just to make it go away and avoid more publicity about this issue. But let's focus on one issue, right? This happened in Milwaukee. Milwaukee is a right-to-work state, meaning you can get fired for any reason or no reason as long as the reason has nothing to do with race, gender, sexual orientation, or the like. All of those areas are protected. So I think someone could watch this video and go, well, look at his constitutional rights were violated because he was making a political statement and that is protected. No, it isn't. Your employer can have a rule, just like this owner of this Rosati's franchise in Milwaukee, that employees are not allowed to make political statements. There's two things I need to say about that, though. First, if that is a rule at this Rosati's, then it needs to be evenly applied. And what I mean by that is there can be no wearing of Trump hats. There can be no staff meetings where people talk about voting. There can be no one else wearing any article of clothing at all that makes any sort of political statement. Because if the employer is allowing some of those things to take place, like maybe the employer loves Trump and he lets people wear Trump hats all the time. Well, if he allows everyone to wear Trump hats, then he has to let everyone wear BLM, Black Lives Matter masks. But if he cracks down on all of the Trump stuff, he can crack down on all of the Black Lives Matter stuff. The point here is your employer has to be fair. He or she has to apply the rules evenly across the board. Then the second thing that I got to say about that is, as long as it's enforced evenly, then it's very fact specific. So off this particular case, I think the fact that the gentleman is white and not black helps the employer in the fashion of, will they face legal action? I think the story really changes if the employee is black, because now you have a black person wearing a Black Lives Matter mask. And yes, it's still a political statement, but I don't believe it's any more illegal or legal for the employer to do one thing or the other. Like if he's going to fire this hypothetical black employee wearing a Black Lives Matter masks, I don't think that that is any different legally than him firing the white employee. However, the difference will be from the social pressure applied. So every business, and I have a business and it's the same, if you come out and make a radical statement about anything political at this point in time, it's more likely than not that you're going to be canceled, that your business is going to be no longer. And we've seen that happen with businesses where maybe a business owner says something that he or she shouldn't have. Maybe the business owner assaults somebody. When those things happen, and if they are connected to a political event, then they're going to be in trouble every day. And again, when I mean in trouble, I mean social trouble, meaning that the citizenry are no longer going to support that particular business. And businesses obviously don't like that. So in situations like this, again, going back to the hypothetical of the black person being fired wearing a Black Lives Matter mask, that particular pressure that the business would face, in my opinion, is going to be much more than firing the white person. But they will still feel pressure from firing that white person. So in a roundabout way, and I'm going to say it directly at this point in time, is look at, as long as the employer applies the rules evenly across the board, doesn't matter if it's a Democrat or a Republican, then the employer's okay. But if the employer is not enforcing things evenly across the board, then they are going to be in trouble. Listen, these situations happen to everybody in everyday life. You know people that have been let go from their jobs or what have you. Leave your comments and questions below. Leave an issue you want me to talk about. I'm happy. You see a video you want me to dissect. I'm happy to do it. Please leave your comments and questions below. And until next time, this is Byron Brown and you're watching Sports Talk Law Talk.